right, guys. Well, today we have a special guest with us. We have Grace and Julian Solis. Grace is actually both me and David. She's our sister, and so that's kind of cool. We get to have our sister on the podcast here today. But recently,
Yeah.
they've actually joined us in ministry at the church, and so we want to just interview them and kind of get some thoughts and stuff from them. And so, just starting out, guys, how is ministry treating you?
It's good, man. It's good. So far it's busy, with
Yeah,
everything else, everything involved with it
Yeah,
and, having a job and stuff. It's busy, but it's a good kind of busy.
yeah.
right,
Do you want to
right.
walk through what you guys do, like Julian specifically, like when it comes to church, the young adults, all that, kind of give a brief rundown of all that.
Sure, yeah. So we are basically I am kind of like the media guy, so I do the slides and sound booth and all that. That's kind of my domain there, and as well as we together are running a young adults class. So like what other people would call like the college and career type age group. We have a class there that we started not too long ago. Um, but yeah, that's been a blast. That's been a blast being a part of that.
Good. That's awesome. So when it comes to Steve, what kind of other questions do you have to kind of maybe ask both of them, kind of their take on ministry, upbringing, things like that?
Yeah. So what have you guys learned? Obviously, this isn't your very first ministry that you've been a part of. You guys were obviously serving elsewhere for a little bit of time. What kind of different nuances have you found serving in this ministry that you appreciate, things that you're trying to, take more advantage of? Just kind of talk to us a little bit about kind of the highs and lows that you're going through right now.
Yeah, it's definitely so obviously I grew up in the church, so I'm a little bit more familiar with it. But when we were first married, we were in a Hispanic church, so that was definitely an adjustment for me because Spanish isn't my first language.
Hmm.
And I'm not as fluent as Julian. He speaks Spanish fluently, so that was definitely an adjustment for me. And just with playing the piano and stuff, I had to really listen closely. The music was different, just the way that people even conducted themselves because it's a whole different culture. So for me, I think it's in a way it's kind of nice to be back to a more
Yeah.
familiar culture.
Hmm.
But at the same time, I miss the different fun activities they would have, like a bunch of
Sure.
food and stuff like that. It was cool to be a part of the Hispanic culture as well. So um, I guess yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me the biggest thing was with that Hispanic church. It was a great ministry. We loved it, but it was really far from where we lived. So we commuted about an hour and 15 minutes if there was traffic, anywhere from an hour and 15 minutes to an hour and a half or more to get there. And it was a ministry that we loved being a part of. That's why we made the trip and we made the sacrifice. But especially being here now and being, like 10 minutes from the church, there is so much more of, I guess, the kind of the blessing that God designed the church to have that we weren't able to be a part of. And I think that's the blessing of ministry that comes with, or the blessing of community that's supposed to come with
Right.
church.
Right.
And that's something that I've been thinking through, and this is probably something we're going to talk about at some point in the podcast. But just building and being a part of a community of people that are all together striving to serve the Lord is a dimension in our life that we did not have for a while. And I don't
Mm.
think we realized how much we were missing it until really we came here and started to be able to,
Yeah.
have that in our lives.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I was just thinking about it. I've been in ministry for a little while now, and obviously, me and my siblings grew up in ministry. But that being said, like, a lot of times people view church as like, well, like, what can I get out of it? Who can bless
Yeah.
me? And is it worth it for me to go this Sunday? Who's going to be there? There's so many questions people ask.
Mhm.
But I feel like there's a blessing that the ministers get when people show up, and there's a blessing there, a fellowship that I don't think other people really think about a lot of times. Obviously, this is kind of like your job. This is kind of like what you do, on Sundays, not just Sundays, right? Wednesdays and throughout the week, really. I work at the office. So, but that being said, like there's a certain element there with like you know, if nobody showed up, it wouldn't just be pointless. It would be kind of sad. You know, it'd be like, well, but this is, you know, the fellowship of believers that God's designed, and they're not here. You know, and so there's a blessing, I think, with you were mentioning too, just the local aspect of a local church, and I think that a lot of people do make excuses like why I don't go to church as much as I should, or you know, whatever the case may be. We're very prone to making excuses, but you know, the local aspect of it really helps keep you connected. And so it's been good. I've been, you know, I've been blessed to have you guys alongside and helping us out. It's been good. So
Good.
Yeah, I think go ahead, Dave.
I was just gonna ask both of you a question. I'll start with Grace. Essentially, like, why do you want to serve God in ministry? And I'll pre-frame that by saying that Grace, you grew up as a pastor's kid, same as me and Steve. We've had a lot of people ask us, like, hey, you grew up as a pastor's kid and like you still want to do ministry. Like, why is that? Because I feel like a lot of pastors' kids, they don't really want to do ministry, maybe because of things they went through, things they've seen. So kind of just walk us through a little bit of your upbringing, and when did you start to realize, okay, I want to be able to serve God with the rest of my life?
Yeah, so definitely went through some challenges being a ministry kid, pastor's kid.
Hmm.
But there was definitely a point where I thought I'm never doing this just for the sake of my children. I didn't want my children to have to go through things that I had been through. So
Hmm.
I was just kind of said, you know, I'm not gonna pursue ministry because that's not something that I want my children to have to go through, and and even myself too. But I think when I met Julian and we were talking and stuff, and I don't even think we were officially dating. I told him I don't think I want to do ministry. That's not something that I want to do. I grew up in it, and he wanted to be a missionary. He was all zealous and excited and everything, and I was like, you don't understand. It's crazy and a lot. But I think just
Hmm.
watching other people be successful in ministry, and when it comes down to it, there really is no greater joy than having a lasting impact on people, an eternal impact. It's the only job in the whole world where, you know, you can take people to heaven with you and you have an eternal impact.
mhm.
So for me, ministry is, it's definitely a sacrifice. It's a lot, but it's also very rewarding. It can be rewarding,
Hmm.
but you kind of have to stick with it. And also, Julian was very much so set on, well, um, ministry is, you know, what I want to do with my life. So if you're not willing to even consider that, then
Hmm.
this probably won't work out. And so I kind of had to pray through it and give it to the Lord. A lot of it is just trusting God. And I just have, I think at the time, especially, I was having difficulty trusting people in general. And I projected that onto
Yeah.
God. So just trusting God, you're going to take care of my kids and me and whatever problems are going to happen in the future, and that you're going to be faithful just as you've been for my parents and people that I've been able to see, and also just being able to make a difference that's eternal, I guess is why I am still in the ministry.
Mm.
Yeah, that's good. How about you, Julian? Like, why serve God in ministry?
I never wanted to serve God in ministry. I'm not one of those stories where I'm super shy and like I'm not. I'm really outgoing and stuff. I love people, but I also know that people can be really difficult.
Hmm.
But I also understood, I guess, the gravity, the seriousness of that kind of a role. And so for me, that was a really big responsibility that I did not really want. But there came a point in my life where I felt the Lord just speaking to my heart, where this is what I want you to do. This is what I want you to be involved in. And it just became undeniable in my heart that that's what the Lord wanted me to do. And so I didn't really have much of a choice. I mean, I could rebel, but
Hmm.
always I do have a desire to do what God wants me to do, and that's what I felt like He wanted me to do. So,
That makes sense. When did that kind of hit you though? Like, when would you say you like
so I
knew
was
100%?
14. I believe
Okay.
I was 14. So it was I went to public school for my entire upbringing up to the end of middle school. So I went to public school up to the eighth grade. Then for high school, I went to a Christian school. The first year that I was there, they had a camp in the winter. So like it was middle of January. They took us to the Solid Rock Group's uh, winter camp or something. But I forget what they called it, but it was a winter camp. We were there for like 4 days. There was a bunch of preaching, and I felt the Lord calling me to ministry, but I didn't really want to give into it, really. So I was wrestling with it for the whole week. And by the end of the week, I surrendered to do whatever God wanted me to do, even though I knew He was kind of calling me to ministry and I was still kind of pushing it off. But as I continued in my own devotions throughout the rest of the week, it just, like I said, it became undeniable. There was, I knew that if I continued to reject God's plan for my life, in that calling, that number one, I was going to regret it and I was going to knowingly be rebelling. So I just had to come to a point where I surrendered to what God wanted me to do, even though I was kind of scared about what the future would hold. So.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense.
Gotcha. Good. Hey, Grace, you had mentioned something just a little bit ago. Don't want to change the topic too much, but I think that there's some value in asking this. For those maybe who are in ministry or have some experience in ministry and they struggle with people and just knowing how to process and how to essentially, move on from people being people, and that's really what ministry is working with people. And so I say a lot to say you can be as specific as you want. You don't need to get too specific if you don't want to, but just what would you say as like a suggestion for folks who maybe struggle with maybe things that you struggled with in the past working with people and people just again being people, and what are some thoughts on that?
I'm definitely not like the person with all the answers on this because I'm still working through it
Sure.
myself. But things that help me, I think, just really grounding yourself in the Word of God and just making your identity and what God thinks about you and doing everything for the Lord and not doing it for people. Because if you do it for people, it's never going to be enough, or they'll be disappointed or you'll be disappointed. But if you do it for God, no matter what happens, if you have a small ministry, a big ministry, a growing ministry, whatever, at least you're doing your best and you're doing it unto the Lord. So that's something that's really helped me when people are crazy, to just feel like, okay, you know what, I'm not doing it for them.
Yeah.
And maybe they're having a bad reaction, but as long as
Yeah.
God's reaction is good, that's what actually matters.
That's
And then
really good.
also separating yourself kind of from it, if when it gets really tough, to just see yourself as almost like a public figure
Mhm.
can help as well, to just almost entirely separate
Yeah.
yourself from the experience. But
Yeah, no, that's good. I appreciate that. I think that a lot of folks do. Dave was just mentioning, as pastors' kids and people in ministry. I mean, a lot of people get hurt. I mean, it's just the nature of it. And again, just working with people, But that being said, I think that there always is a solution, and I don't think that God wants, God doesn't want it to be something that we that turns us away from him. That's not his goal. He wants to use that in our life, and yet it can be very challenging, like especially for a lot of people. There's a lot of deep hurts in ministry, and so but just being able to process that, right, and I appreciate that. I think that my experience, I know I can say this, that my experience in ministry, growing up in ministry, I should say, growing up in ministry, because we're in the same family, was different somewhat to your experience. And so, but I appreciate that. That's a good answer. So
yeah, and also real quick, a more practical um, solution as well. Like, I do think that it's important that you talk about things that bother you, because that's
yeah,
something I did not do and that I probably
yeah,
should have done more of, but I had nobody to talk to, right? Because your dad's the pastor, so you
sure,
can't talk to the pastor, and your mom's the pastor's wife, so you can't talk to the pastor's wife.
yeah,
And maybe the older people in the church, or just whatever, maybe they're the ones causing the problem, so you can't talk to them. So but just finding somebody that you can talk to, I think, is very important, even if it's a counselor, or I mean,
mhm,
obviously now I'm married, I can talk to Julian about whatever. And just, even if you're just
sure,
ranting, just getting
sure,
it off your chest rather than just holding it in. Um,
yeah.
but
I know. I don't know if it was Brother Oled or it might have been Brother Monty. I can't remember which one it was. It might have been both. But they suggested finding as a pastor's kid, finding a pastor, someone to counsel with. And
Mhm.
I guess it doesn't have to be a pastor, but everybody, in your church has a pastor. If you went looking for another church, you would have a pastor. Okay, so like everybody's got that figure though, that that spiritual head they can kind of counsel with and stuff like that. But as a pastor's kid, it's just it's a different dynamic. And
Mhm.
so having somebody there, that's good. And I think that we got um we were introduced to that thought as teenagers, I remember. And so thinking like, wow, like this would be really helpful to have somebody to counsel with. And so that's a really good point. I appreciate that, bringing that out
Yeah.
too. So
Julian, how about you? Any advice on how people can deal with other people in ministry? Anything that's kind of helped you through that?
Yeah, of course, I didn't grow up with the same, I guess, background that you guys did because I didn't grow up as a ministry kid. My parents got saved at the just right around the same time I did, so I didn't grow up with the same background. But still, I've been in the few years that I've been in ministry or around Christian people, I have been hurt by a lot of people that claim the name of Jesus Christ. And so, a couple things that come to mind. First of all, I think we have to keep in mind that we're not dealing with when we're dealing with somebody who's hurting us, we're not dealing with the people themselves. This goes back to Ephesians where Paul says we're not wrestling against flesh and blood but against principalities and powers, against rulers of the darkness
Yeah.
of this world. He says in I think it's First Corinthians or Colossians. He says that we regard nobody according to the flesh if they've been saved, especially. And so, what he's talking about there is we don't see people for people. We see people as souls. If we're doing the right thing, because that's in First Corinthians, the context is the message of reconciliation, and so we're seeing people as souls that need to be saved, that need to be transformed. If they're already saved, that they need to be transformed by the power of the gospel. So trying to keep that in mind, and that's definitely a mental shift that we have to make. And the Bible talks about renewing our minds, and that's definitely one aspect to it when it comes to dealing with other people, is remembering that everybody's at a a point in their spiritual journey. Nobody's arrived. Nobody's learned how to do the whole Christian thing. Um, and I think keeping that in mind is definitely a source of comfort, and it's also a reminder to always run to Christ. And so that's the first thing that comes to mind. The other thing I wanted to go off of what Grace was saying. I think it's definitely important to share the burdens and the heartaches that we have with other people, because we were not designed to be isolationists. We were designed in the image of God, and God is a social being, right? He's a three in one, and so he's eternally been a social being, and he designed us to be the same way. And so that's why Paul, um or well, wherever it is, but it says, "Bear ye one another's burdens." Right?
right,
That's a
right.
part of the command. That's part of the design of the church, and that's part of the design of every individual. And I think today we are more connected than ever, but only superficially. We're more connected than we've ever been before with technology, with social media, but we've replaced deep and meaningful connections with this type of superficial connection that lacks all of the benefits of actually being connected with a human being. And so that
Sure.
aspect of bearing each other's burdens is a must, that I think we're missing out on definitely today.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. Just so I know we've talked a little bit about the negatives. I kind of want to change the tone a little bit. Obviously, there's a lot of positives with ministry. You guys have been doing a great job in the young adults class. It didn't start out. You guys had just a few folks, and God's been really bringing a whole lot of folks. You mentioned community, and I know you kind of talked a little bit about that. What would you say, are some of the positives that you're learning about specifically in that young adults ministry, and just kind of what's the burden God's given you for now as you're ministering to those folks?
Yeah, I think that people our age and young adult age, especially Gen Z, Gen whatever the next
Alpha.
one, Gen Alpha is. I
Yeah,
think we're starting to realize that we need community. We're starting to get to the point
Yeah.
where we've become wise to the fact that this is something that's necessary, and it's something that we're missing. And now I don't think that nearly enough people have come to that realization yet, but I'm very thankful that I believe that God is using that knowledge in people's hearts, and to the point where there have been a lot of people that we've invited, or that people in the church have invited, that have come as a result of a direct invitation. But there are more than I've ever seen in my life before. There's just people that are just showing up, And people our age, people that are young adult age, like 20s, early 20s, they're just showing up because and a lot of them have expressed to me that the sole reason that they showed up was for a sense of community. And so I think God is using that to grow his church, to that he's been using that to grow our class. And there's I can't even off the top of my head count how many people that are part of our class have come just on their own out of a prompting to seek community. And so I'm very thankful for how the Lord's using that.
Awesome.
That's good.
Good.
I was going to ask, do you feel like you're noticing specifically with young adults that there's not as much of a sense of community? It's kind of like maybe an awkward stage, like you're not married, you're not in college. Like, what's kind of your take on like young adults, maybe greatest struggle, at least with your experience at church?
Yeah, it's well, with young adults especially, this is one of the first generations that have grown up with the level of impact of I guess downstream from technology. And so, like I said, we are more connected superficially than ever before, but this is a generation that has grown up lacking deep and meaningful personal connection with people, especially now. Girls are obviously more social than guys are naturally, but especially the guys, there's a lot of guys that just really need that sense of community. And so I think growing up, even myself, I thought because I was like, the class clown, I like to be I'm very extroverted person. I like to talk to people. I like to make new friends. I like to make people laugh. I've always enjoyed that. Right. And so I came to a realization when I got out of college, I thought I had a lot of friends, but I realized I was friendly towards a lot of people, but I didn't have any actual friends besides Grace. But yeah, I had no friends because I didn't know. Oh yeah, it's Steve. But no, even us, dude, even us, to be honest, for the year where I transferred colleges and then you stayed at the other one, there was that year gap before you came along. We literally didn't even text or call at all that entire time, And I think part of that is a misunderstanding of honestly I think we use a sort of fallacious identity statement to excuse that, right? So I think, what am I saying? So I think we as guys say, we're just guys, that's the way we are. So we just kind of use that identity to like excuse the fact that we don't go out of our way to cultivate relationships, to cultivate friendships. And I think that's something I've realized. I mean, there's another friend of ours, mutual friend of ours, you would know him, but anytime we've gotten together, we've said, dude, we have to have, like, we have a 2 hour conversation. We're like, dude, we have to do this more often. Every single time, without fail, we say we have to call each other. We have to, and not a single time have we actually ever done that yet. so
Yeah.
I think it's something that, as a generation, as a whole, we have to work on, because I think it's necessary for the church context.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just as a little bit of context, me and Julian were roommates in college for a year, and so I actually knew Julian before he met my sister, and so we definitely go back. Had some fun times. We won't talk about those times, but no, I think that I think what you said is good. And for those maybe in young adults ministry, or maybe a young adult who's listening to this, and you obviously mentioned some of the issues that we go through at that stage of life. What are some things that you would recommend and just say, hey, I think that based on what you're learning, these specific things would be really helpful to maybe invest in your relationship with God or become more part of a church community. Like, what are some things that you would just give? Hey, boom, these are some things off the top of your head that would be beneficial.
Yeah, I think whether or not you are a believer, whether or not you've been convinced of your faith, and I know most of the people in your audience are probably going to be believers, but regardless of that fact, I think everyone should go to a church. Everyone should go to a church because of that sense of community that we desperately need, especially if you're young, if you're like young adult age or younger. I think God designed you to be a social person, and to be an isolationist is very detrimental to our health. I mean, we can even look at recent history, COVID. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people that took their lives because they were so alone. They were so alone, and I think that's just a testament to the fact that we are made to be social creatures. We are made to have connections with people, and I think that's a tool for us to find fulfillment and find purpose in our lives and find honestly who we are, because that's something, our identity is something that we kind of figure out as we live life and as we communicate and interact with other people. They bring who we are out of us. Like,
Sure.
so I can
Sure.
think of there's specific friends that bring out a certain part of me that nobody else can bring out. Part of that is, the history that you've had. So like with Steve, you're one of my closest friends, and we've been friends for like ever. There's very few people that I have that kind of friendship with that you can bring out of me, right? And so this goes back to like what C.S. Lewis, something that he said, which is, so say you have three friends, friend A, friend B, friend C, right? And they're all together. In that context, there's a part of them that only they can bring out of each other if all three of them are present. And perhaps if friend C is not there, that part, the part of friend A and B that is present when they're all together, that's not there because there's a shared experience. And so I think it's very important and very understated in our society and in our age demographic, the importance of community. And so I think I would suggest for everybody, whether you're convinced or not of Christianity, find a community that you can be a part of. And of course, I think it should be a spiritual community, a church, because that's where you
Yeah.
can find ultimately purpose, and your calling in the Lord Jesus Christ. So
Yeah, that's good.
That's good.
Something that jumps out to me is when it comes to what you're talking about, community as far as church, having that young adults group, you also ideally have a shared vision. I think in our church, that's the case where we all have a shared vision, which is ultimately to be more like Christ. So if you have, 20 of us that are there together, we're all trying to be more like Christ. There's a lot of things that are going to flow from that. There's going to be a lot of benefits from that. Iron sharpens iron, etc. Things like that. That's just something that kind of jumped out at me. So
yeah, of course, I think that's definitely important, and that's that iron sharpens iron aspect is, we are all supposed to be not only interacting with each other, but with the goal in mind of encouraging one another to be more like Christ. And I think that's something that's been very instrumental in our young adults class, and something I've been trying to be better with is to encourage the people that I'm around, not just have fun with them, not just joke around, but be thankful for who they are and let them know that I'm grateful for them. Good, it's good to see you, but also trying to encourage them, be a good testimony to them, and encourage them to become the image of Christ. Let their lives be a light to those around them as well. So
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
it's
I
good.
and I and I want to kind of just harp on this point just real quick. Like you said, if you're a Christian or not, I mean, for those who are Christians, it makes more sense. But being a part of a community, man, there's nothing like that. There's nothing like being a part of a church community, I should say. And if you don't have a church community with young adults who have a similar vision, really pray about it and ask God to lead you, because there's something about this stage of life. I heard it from another pastor who said it this way, and he's actually works a lot with young people. But he said that the young adults ministry is often the forgotten ministry of the church. A lot of churches build around, a great, nursery and young people and young kids and VBS, and there's so many activities for, young people. And then you have like your older folk, your folks who have been there for forever, and we, your senior saints and those individuals. And usually in most churches you kind of have a lot of ministry for both of those categories, and even for some of the, middle aged and the families and stuff like that. But I think that a lot of times what is missed is that it's kind of like a weird stage of life when you're young adults, you're in college, you're getting into your career. And there's not, in a lot of churches, what I've seen too is there's not a lot of ministry that's being done to those individuals. And so maybe you find yourself like, I don't have this experience, I would love to have this experience. Really pray about it and ask God to just lead you. There's nothing like it, and I think we could all attest to that. And so yeah, I would just encourage you that way. Pray about it, and just ask God to lead you in that way. So
dude, and let me
so
say this, I think it's important to keep in mind that cultivating a community and being part of a community, especially integrating yourself into a community, it's going to be very awkward because anything new is going to be awkward until it's normal. So I just finished listening to this audiobook. I can't remember the guy's name, but the title of the book is Made for People. And it is absolutely fantastic. And it talks about Christian communities, how the Lord designed church to be basically a center for community among people. And so so one of the things that he mentions in his book is that the church should be a catalyst for getting people to go out in small groups to make friendships, build friendships, cultivate friendships with each other, to encourage one another in the Lord. And so you think of the Bible verse that says that we should confess our faults and our weaknesses to one another. So you think about that, and it's like, if I'm to the point with somebody in my friendship with them that I can confess my weaknesses, confess my faults, confess my sins to that person, that is a very intimate relationship. It's got to be a very intimate relationship. And there's a level of vulnerability that is going to come with it that's going to be very, very awkward. It's going to be very strange. And I think that even in my life, I have been conditioned to, anytime I feel uncomfortable, anytime I feel awkward, to just whip out my phone and kind of ignore that. But
Right.
I think it's very important that we resist that, because anything important in life is going to be awkward until we learn the practice of it. So I think definitely push through the awkwardness of maybe a little bit of social anxiety, a little bit of nervousness going into a church for the first time, or trying to talk to a group of people at a youth group, at a young adults group for the first time. It's going to be awkward. It's going to be uncomfortable, but I think it's a biblical command. One of the ideas that he says in the book is that anything new is going to be awkward until it's normal. And so it's valuable to be part of a community, but it's going to be awkward. And I just want to encourage people to go past that, to push past that, and put yourself out there, kind of put yourself in a social atmosphere, even if it's awkward, because at the end of it, that's when you actually get the blessing and the benefit from it.
That's good. Any other like quick ideas of like how people can kind of get that next step, getting into a church, getting involved in church, finding their community, like anything else that you would want to add as far as like practical steps that young people could take from this?
A lot of stuff's online now,
Mhm.
so looking up a church before you visit, seeing if they have the ministry, to try and find a church that actually fits your needs is good. I always research before, obviously we're settled in this church, but when you look for churches to visit, just pulling up the website or seeing the live stream even, to see if it's something that might work for you, might help to avoid a little bit of awkwardness. But yeah, I think just taking this step and yeah.
Yeah, maybe bringing a friend with you, or getting
Yeah.
a family member to
Yeah.
come with you would be good too. So
Yeah, there's
that's
churches too that if you go on their website, there's churches that you can tell they've made it a priority to make sure to take care of new people, and to make sure that they feel part of the community. And so we visited different churches.
Yeah.
Like back when we were living down south, we visited different churches, and there were definitely there was definitely a difference between the churches that made that a priority and those that didn't.
Mhm.
Gotcha. That makes sense. I wanted to go a little bit deeper with a question I asked you guys earlier. So earlier I asked you, why did you guys want to serve God? Like, what was kind of your thought process of that? But I want to ask, when it comes to you guys, if you were to, have 30 seconds to give advice to a group of young people, young adults, whatever, like, why Jesus? Like, if you were to explain the question, like, why Jesus, why pursue Jesus, what would you say? Because I think that now more than ever, there's so much technology, there's so many distractions, there's so many things out there trying to pull our attention, our energy, our focus. So now more than ever, I believe it's harder for young people to answer that question, like, why Jesus? Like,
Mhm.
why pursue him instead of all of these other things? So what would you say, maybe in 20, 30 seconds, what would you say is the reason why young people in general should pursue a relationship with God?
Sure, I'll start. Um, I would say because Jesus has absolutely changed my life. And I know I grew up in ministry and everything, but there was a time where I wasn't, you know, necessarily with the Lord, and experience a little bit of the world. And then also just recently too, within the last few years, I went through a really, really hard time that I won't go into right now. But all I can say is that at one point I finally had enough and I cried out to God and I said, you got to change my life. Otherwise, this isn't basically like I don't want to live if my life doesn't change. And my life has drastically changed. I'm in a feel like a really good spot in comparison to even last year where I was at this time. I feel happy. I feel fulfilled in my life. Obviously, I still have struggles, but it's like a 180. It's so much better. It's amazing. And when you find who Jesus is and how much he loves you and cares about you, and not who the church may portray Jesus to be, but who he actually is, and you have a relationship with him, right? It's life changing. So why do I do it? Is because it actually changed my life, and I he can change other people's lives too, like he did in the Bible. So yeah, your turn.
Yeah, I think for me, I would take it from the aspect of, I guess from the negative aspect, as a warning. Yeah, as a warning to other people. So I would think of it from the aspect of, you should take Jesus seriously because of the dangers of things that you mentioned about technology, um, all the different things that can be numbing agents. You have to be careful about that, because so this morning I was talking in the young adults class about identity, and one of the things that I said is that our identity will build our future, because our identity um, influences our actions. And so if our identity influences our actions, it'll build a future for us, right? And so one of the things that I mentioned is, today technology and things that we have that are pulling our attention every which way, they are very good drugs in the sense of they're numbing agents, right? So our identity is very intimate, and a lot of people have a lot of negative emotions associated with our identity. And so the temptation is to use technology, substances, whatever the case may be, to distract from that instant pain that you feel when you think about yourself and what you actually believe about yourself. And so the danger becomes alleviating the pain in the moment, but your identity will still continue to influence all your actions, whether you choose to recognize that or not. And so I think the Lord has designed us to have a God shaped hole inside of our hearts. And so I guess I would just approach it from a cautionary standpoint of, don't allow yourself to be distracted away from answering the questions that God has deeply embedded inside of your heart about what is your purpose, what is your identity, what is your mission in life, what is the adventure that God wants you to undertake in these next few years and in your future. God wants you to answer those questions, and he wants you to find the answers to those questions in him.
Yeah, that's good. One other thing, Grace, you mentioned something and it made me think of this. Jesus is not the same as church. And I think a lot of people think they're the same. And I think you have to realize that people are people and people hurt people, but Jesus doesn't hurt people. Jesus is a healer. He came to help and to save and to deliver and to meet needs in our life. And so I think people need to realize, if they've been in a situation where they've been hurt, or maybe they're nervous, they don't want to get hurt again. They need to remember that the solution is still the same, and that is getting to know Jesus for who he is, as your personal savior, as your personal healer and helper. And so I think when it comes to church and Jesus, you do need to realize that they're not the same. And yet we are a group of believers who do have a relationship with Jesus that meet on a regular basis. And church is incredibly important. And I do believe that that's God's design for us to be a part of. But do remember that they're not the same, and nothing can replace that. But again, if you're having a bad experience, that's not because of Jesus. That's not who he is. And so don't miss that, because that's very important.
Yeah, that's good, Steve. I think that's partly why, at least for me, I've been talking a lot more to the young people, to the teens, about getting to know Jesus, reading the Gospels, and really understanding who he is, and being able to focus more on that as opposed to a lot of other things I could focus on. I just think that that's so important. That's the core of everything. And I was going to add on to what Julian said. I heard that more young men are going to church. Like, a lot of young men, more than normal, are going back to church. And it's, according to what I heard, the guy said that it's because a lot of young men are realizing that things don't satisfy. You know, you have a lot of young people just pursuing all these things, trying everything, doing it all, kind of like Solomon did. And in the end, they're just empty. It didn't satisfy, it's not fulfilling. And so it makes me think of the verse in Ecclesiastes 12:13. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. So that to me is very interesting. I think that that's a really good thing, though, that this younger generation, I believe, is starting to realize, you know what, all these things that we've been pursuing, all this technology, in the end, it's just kind of empty. Like, I'm still not fulfilled. Like, there has to be more than this. So I think that our generation is in a good spot in that sense, that I think they're more open to the gospel. They're more open to coming to church, getting to know God. So that's encouraging to me.
Yeah,
Dude,
absolutely.
I heard a Jim Carrey quote this week, which was it was a quote from I guess something he said in a commencement speech, right? And it was something along the lines of, "I would want everybody in the world to be rich and successful, just so that at the end of it, they realize that that's not the answer." And I thought that was very profound. It's very, very
Wow.
true.
Yeah,
That is good.
yeah, that's good.
I love that.
That's good.
That's a good point.
So real quick, we're gonna have to wrap up here soon, but you guys had mentioned you'd been a part of a different ministry, and Julian, you are Hispanic, and so I know that your burden, though, it has been recently to go back to Ecuador, right, and to serve there as a missionary. And so, what's kind of your burden there, and just kind of, I don't know if you have a timeline or what, but just kind of fill us in on that real quick.
Well, it is something that I felt in my heart a long time ago, but I don't have all the answers about what that looks like. And I think that I've had to come to a realization where that's okay. You know, God is not going to reveal to me the entire next 5 or 10 years of my life. It's something that He wants us to do. It's a relationship that He wants us to have with Him daily. So I feel like the Lord has called me there, but I don't know exactly to what type of ministry. I don't know if it's like a church planner, evangelistic, more like evangelistic style. I don't know what that looks like. Right now, I'm asking Him on a daily basis to try to reveal to me what that looks like, and just still also at the same time be present with the things that He has for me here, because I think there's in each step of our life, there's something that God wants us to learn to prepare us for what He has for us down the road. So I've been trying to be more present as well, trying to not miss the lessons that God has for me now, because I'm so focused on, you know, the ultimate goal that I feel like He has called me to, which is a good thing, you know. But I think He has things right now for me in this stage of my life to prepare me for that. So I'll keep praying, asking Him to reveal to me more of what He wants me to do with that. But at the same time, I'm doing my best to be present, to be part of the church that He's plugged me into now, and to learn the lessons that He has for me in preparation for that future that He's got.
Absolutely.
We
That's good.
also are visiting the country in September,
Yeah, September. Yeah.
Nice.
Okay.
end of September.
Okay.
So that'll be good for me. Obviously, I've never been there, so we are excited about that. It's not necessarily a survey trip, but it's a trip. So
Yeah, yeah.
Sure. Okay.
hopefully, I'm hoping that it'll provide a little, maybe even clarity on the timing and aspects.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's good. I'm sure it will.
Good.
That's cool. Anything else, Steve, that you wanted to add? Any other
Well, I
questions?
mean, no, I think we're coming to kind of our close time wise, but guys, yeah, it's been good, and I'm sure we'll do this again. You guys have a lot of stuff that I believe you can add as value, and so we'll definitely have you on again. But thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Thanks. It was a blast.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Thanks.